Welcome back. Investors around the world watching for developments on Deutsche Bank. The International Monetary Fund warning yesterday that Deutsche Bank poses a risk to the stability of the global financial system. My next guest has a unique perspective on what's happening in Europe and the financial services sector, currently serving as the head of a major European bank and wealth manager, as well as the former president of Germany's central bank. Joining me right now is the former head of the Bundesbank, as well as the chairman of UBS, Axel Weber, joining us. Axel, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
It's a pleasure, Maria. Good to see you.
I want to talk about UBS and incredible progress that you've been leading there. But let me start with these worries over Deutsche Bank, because I want to read you. This is from the Wall Street Journal this morning. And it says, in its 2015 annual report, Deutsche Bank said its exposure to derivatives was $46.9 trillion. As a comparison, Germany's gross domestic product in 2015 was just over $3 trillion. So that raw size of the derivatives portfolio, Axel, has market participants worried that if they start selling that portfolio, that's going to impact the entire system. How worried should we be about this?
Well, look, if you look at what happened over the last 7-8 years since the crisis, regulators and banks have spent an enormous amount of time for making the system safer, making each of the banks safer by raising massive amounts of capital. If you look at pre-crisis, you could run a global bank on 1 or 2% of core tier 1 capital. Now most of the banks are way above 10%. Mark Carney, the head of the FSB himself, said that banks have increased their capital by a factor of 7 to 10. So the system is much more stable. It's true some banks have more exposure to investment banking and to derivative markets, but as a whole, the whole system is more stable, and many of these derivative books are counterparty exposures that can be netted out, hedged. What is important is that there is no unorderly developments in markets, and I don't really think there is a chance or a risk of seeing unorderly developments at this stage.
Right, because that counterparty risk was what got us in trouble back in 2007, right? Which has led people to say, uh-oh, this could be another Lehman Brothers moment. You don't think so?
No, I think, as I said, the system is much more stable. All of us have submitted resolution and recovery plans, and the regulators are on top of that. They look at the credibility of these plans, look at the Fed, CCAR, and CLAR processes that have been rolled out for most of the banks. So I think the system is in a much better place. What happened at Lehman was that we were not prepared. Now everyone is preparing for that moment where you need to move to resolution. We're issuing special capital to make that transition credible. So I think the system is in a much safer place than we were 8 years ago.
When we first learned that the Department of Justice was going to levy this $14 billion fine, everybody thought, well, what's going on here? You know, if they are shaking this company down for $14 billion, you know, what's next? And Angela Merkel comes out and says, look, we're not going to bail anybody out. But you have to believe that Deutsche Bank, being a jewel of the German economy, a jewel of the German financial system, will be bailed out if they need it. What's your take on what we heard from Merkel on that?
Well, I'm not really privy to any information regarding exposures of other banks. I can only talk about UBS, and UBS has been in a similar situation in 2008. We've rebuilt the bank. We've basically reestablished our market leadership in Switzerland. We're now in a totally different place at the bank, and I think it is very important that everyone does their homework, that you focus on capital, on liquidity, that you focus on resolution, and it's each bank's job to get to a better place relative to where we were. And I think all of us are working on that, including Deutsche.